What kind of society would be the best kind of society in which to live? Many famous thinkers over the centuries have pondered this question, and indeed some have written books about it. Among these famous thinkers have been Plato, John Locke, Thomas Jefferson, and Karl Marx. The most famous book on the subject of utopia is Plato's Republic. And this program is the third in a series I'm doing on the subject of Plato's Republic. Allow me to provide a brief review of the first two segments. The Republic was written in 380 BC, about 400 years before the time of Christ. And in the Republic, Plato talks about what kind of government he believes would be the ideal government. Plato says the government should be one that consists of philosopher kings. These people would be people who have passed a battery of tests, studied philosophy for at least 5 years, and have reached the age of 50. And if they've done all of those things, they have therefore qualified to become a philosopher king. In Plato's fictional utopia, there would be more than one philosopher king. In other words, the society would be ruled by a group of philosopher kings. And as I indicated last week, Plato believed that women could also qualify to be philosopher kings. He never used the expression philosopher queens. What Plato's objective was to combine wisdom and political power. Again, he believed a government consisting of philosopher kings would combine wisdom with political power. Plato did not believe in democracy, and the main reason he did not believe in democracy is that he believed that eventually a democracy would result in excessive liberty, and this excessive liberty would be terminated by tyranny. With regard to the ideal socioeconomic system, Plato believed that in the ideal society there should be no rich people and no poor people. Plato believed that both rich and poor pose a danger to society. And in the Republic he says this. Plato says that wealth is the parent of luxury and laziness, and poverty is the parent of meanness and viciousness. And both wealth and poverty are parents of discontent. Last week, I zeroed in on Plato's ideas concerning what education would be like in his ideal society. Plato said the best way to educate anyone, boys and girls, men and women, is to educate both the mind and the body. So his ideal was a sound mind in a sound body. And he believed that to educate the mind, one had to study what we would call today the humanities, philosophy, history, literature. And to educate the body, one would engage in studying physical education. Plato believed there was a real danger in just educating the mind or just educating the body. Plato said that the mere athlete, the one who has not studied the humanities, the one who has not been an academic student, the mere athlete is likely to become a savage. And the mere academic student, the academic student who is not engaged in physical fitness and studying physical education, the mere academic student, Plato claimed, would be too soft, too effeminate to contend with the adversities of daily living. Today's program will focus on some more information concerning Plato's ideas about education, and then I'll move to a discussion of Plato's ideas concerning the arts, specifically literature and music, and also his discussion of what the role of religion should be in the ideal society. Plato stimulates our thinking about the goals of education. The best description I'm familiar with, and it's a very concise one, concerning what might be the goals of education is the following. It's been said that education should produce honorable thinking people. Education should produce honorable thinking people. And by thinking, the idea is that educated people should have the capacity to think critically. They should be able to evaluate propaganda. They should be able to evaluate propaganda, whether it's coming from the government, the advertising industry, the entertainment industry, etc. And also, another very important purpose of education is to cultivate mental health. This, I think, is so often overlooked by educators who focus simply on intellectual development. A.S. Neal, a very famous and controversial British educator, in his book called Summerhill, said this about education and mental health, and I'm quoting him. "I'd rather see a school produce a healthy street cleaner than a neurotic scholar." Let's move now to Plato's attitude towards the arts. Plato believed in censorship. Plato believed that literature and music in particular should be censored. Why so? Well, Plato believed that in the ideal society, literature and music, as well as the other arts, should promote morality. He believed that poets and storytellers must encourage people to be just. Again, poets and storytellers must encourage people to be just. That their works must teach the lesson that injustice results in unhappiness, whereas justice results in happiness. So Plato wants the citizens of his society to be exposed to literature and music that teaches them that the best path to happiness in life is being a good person, a decent person, a just person. Let me give you Plato's own words. And again, these are from The Republic, his very famous book. They, the poets and storytellers, declare that many men are happy, though unjust, and happy, although just. Excuse me, let me read that again. They, the poets and storytellers, declare that many men are happy, though unjust, and unhappy, although just. Wait a second, I got that wrong. Many men are, no, and unhappy, although just. Yes, that is right, excuse me. They teach that injustice is profitable, if not found out. Such things we will forbid. Such things we will forbid them to say, and command them to sing and to fable the opposite. So Plato, in that passage, is criticizing Greek poets and storytellers who have come before him, who in their works have portrayed just people very often as unhappy people, and unjust people as happy people. And Plato says, in his ideal society, that will not be permitted. Let me go on to a discussion of Plato's attitude towards music. Plato believed that music affects people's attitudes, manners, and customs. And since music influences people's attitudes, manners, and customs, it means that music can have a powerful influence on society. And therefore, since he wants to ensure that music will have a positive influence on society, he believes the government should censor it. Specifically in The Republic, Plato talks about some of the ways music influences young people. And this is really fascinating when one considers that he wrote this book 2,000 years ago. Plato says that music can affect young people and the cut of their hair. He says music can affect the way young people dress, and music can affect the way young people comport themselves. Plato believed that good music, and the word good is in quotes, in other words, his version of good music, can be psychologically therapeutic. His version of good music would promote virtue in society and would also promote patriotism. In Plato's Utopia, music that doesn't have a, quote, positive, end of quote, effect on society will not be allowed. It is interesting that Plato talks extensively about the influence of music, because another very famous philosopher who lived 200 years before Plato and lived a great distance from Greece, said similar things about music. And I'm referring to the Chinese philosopher Confucius. Confucius also emphasized how much music can affect manners and customs. And Confucius said the best way for a society to improve its manners and customs is to improve the music. Confucius said this, and I'm quoting him, "For changing the people's manners and customs, there is nothing better than music." He then went on to say this, "When manners decay, the nation decays with them." Again, when manners decay, the nation decays with them. What might be some alternatives to censorship? Again, I think it's fair to say that Americans and people throughout the world would like music to have a positive influence on society. And again, that's very controversial what one might mean by positive. But what might be some alternatives to censorship? I think it's fair to say that most people in democratic societies don't believe that music should be censored. Well, among the alternatives, of course, would be some that have been used in democratic societies. Boycotts, for example. We know that when some Americans have objected to certain television programs, that they have organized boycotts against the advertisers on those programs, and in some cases have succeeded in either altering the format of the program or getting the program off the air. My own preference for ensuring that the arts, music and literature, and also the media, will have a positive influence on society is education. Perhaps since I like to think of myself as an educator, it's only natural that I would look to education as the solution if there is one. Many years ago, I taught a course to young people entitled The American Scene. And in this course, we analyzed rather extensively the positive and negative influences. Let me rephrase that. The possible positive and negative influences of television, advertising, and sports in America. I tried to encourage my students to think very critically, again, about television, advertising, and sports, as well as other subjects. And I find it lamentable that in the United States, in the year 2005, that it is a very rare school system that requires a course to have students explore the possible positive and negative influences of television, advertising, and sports. It's interesting that if one looks at the curriculum of many school systems, one might get the idea that teaching about the War of 1812 is more important than getting students to think about how television and advertising may be affecting their lives. And of course, as part of advertising, as part of that unit on advertising, I think it's very important that schools get children and even university students to think deeply about how political advertising might be affecting them, and how much political advertising from the left and the right is simply propaganda. Plato stimulates our thinking about art, music, literature, poetry, and sculpture. And his work raises the question, what is art? And what should be the role of the arts in society? The most controversial and thought-provoking book I've ever read about art was written by the great Russian novelist Tolstoy. He wrote a book which I highly recommend, entitled What is Art? He spent many years writing the book, and let me give you a brief overview of Tolstoy's take on what constitutes good art. Tolstoy defines art in the following way, and I'm quoting him: "Art is the activity by means of which one person, having experienced a feeling, conveys it consciously to others." Again, Tolstoy believes that essentially art consists of the artist conveying feelings he or she has experienced to other people. Tolstoy says that the best art deals with particular kinds of feelings. Again, the best art deals with particular kinds of feelings. Which feelings? Well, brotherhood and the love of one's neighbor. Allow me again to quote Tolstoy. Art should make it so that the feelings of brotherhood and love of one's neighbor become habitual feelings, an instinct for everyone. Tolstoy goes on to say, and this is quite controversial, that great art can be understood by everyone. Great art can be understood by everyone. Again, his own words. Great works of art are great because they are accessible and comprehensible to everyone. In Tolstoy's book, What is Art?, he takes Beethoven, among other very famous artists, to task. He says, for example, that Beethoven's famous Ninth Symphony is not great art. And he claims it's not great art because it's too complicated, that most people can't understand it. Tolstoy says this, and again I'm quoting Tolstoy, "To say that a work of art is good but incomprehensible is the same as saying that a particular kind of food is good but that people cannot eat it." He goes on to say, good art is always understood by everyone. Those are Tolstoy's own words. Again, good art is always understood by everyone. Tolstoy also claimed that art promotes empathy, or at least should promote empathy. He says this, again his own words, "Genuine art makes us rejoice over another's joy, grieve over another's grief, merge our souls with another's. That's the essence of art." Plato believes that our common experience is one of both grief and joy, and that art can help liberate people from their isolation and loneliness by expressing what is common in the human experience. Again, Tolstoy believed that great art could result in people feeling less lonely, less alienated from their fellow human beings. Again, by emphasizing what is common in our experience. Plato and Tolstoy stimulate our thinking about what standards one might use to determine what is good art. My guess is that some of you watching now disagree with much of what Plato and much of what Tolstoy has to say about art and what good art consists of. Well, again, they do help us to think more clearly about the question, what standards might be used to determine what is good art? And I've jotted down some possible standards here. So let me throw some ideas at you. It seems to me that good art helps a person understand himself and others and the society in which he lives. Also, that good art can promote understanding of life, of human life, as well as other kinds of life. And that good art can promote understanding of the pervasiveness of suffering in the world. The idea that all human beings experience anxiety, stress, loneliness, tragedy. And when art does this, when art succeeds in promoting an understanding of the pervasiveness of suffering in the world, this can result in compassion. And a society of compassionate people, I submit to you, is a superior society to a society in which very few people feel compassion for their fellow human beings. According to Tolstoy, which artists have produced genuine art? Art that promotes the brotherhood of mankind, art that promotes kindness in the world. Well, let me name a few of the artists that Tolstoy names and praises. He says, for example, the Hebrew prophets did good work, in promoting brotherhood in the Old Testament. Also, he praises the writers of the New Testament gospel parables. And he praises the French writer Molière. He likes him very much. And the English writer Dickens. And the French writer Victor Hugo. Tolstoy also admired his fellow Russian Dostoevsky and some of his works. With regard to painting, Tolstoy very much admired the French painter Millet, who is known for his paintings of peasant life. And in music, Tolstoy specifically praises Bach's violin aria and Chopin's E-flat major nocturne. And he also praises selected works of Beethoven and Mozart. Tolstoy goes on to say that art is a spiritual organ of human life. Art is a spiritual organ of human life. A question I think Tolstoy's book raises is this. If everyone in the world were exposed to good art, according to Tolstoy's version of good art, would there be less evil doing in the world? Would there be less evil doing in the world because good art often conveys the message that everyone suffers and that no one can be perfectly happy, and that therefore people would be less envious and compassionate if exposed to good art, and therefore less likely to steal other people's happiness. On the subject of religion, Plato believed that society should promote belief in God. Plato believed that if people believe in God, they are more likely to be moral. He believed that people need supernatural sanctions in order to behave themselves. He also believed that the soul is immortal and that there are post-death rewards and punishments. What might be some of the possible advantages and disadvantages of a government promoting belief in God, as Plato's government would do? Well, among the possible advantages, perhaps, of promoting belief in God and religion might be less crime. In fact, Napoleon believed that if people were religious and believed in God, that maybe he would need less policemen in society to control them. It would be as if there would be a policeman in everyone's soul. And perhaps, if the government encourages belief in God and religion, maybe there would be more love and kindness in the world. Perhaps Voltaire, the very famous French intellectual, stimulates our thinking on this subject. He said this, and I find this quote extremely thought-provoking. Voltaire said, "If God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. If God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him." Benjamin Franklin also believed that. Franklin was not a churchgoer, but as far as we know, Benjamin Franklin did believe in God. And he wrote a very famous letter. Benjamin Franklin wrote a very famous letter to someone who had publicly ridiculed religion. And let me give you Franklin's own words, because I think this is quite germane to what I'm talking about. Franklin wrote, "You yourself may find it easy to live a virtuous life without the assistance afforded by religion. But think how great a proportion of mankind consists of weak and ignorant men and women, and of inexperienced and inconsiderate youth of both sexes, who have need of the motives of religion to restrain them from vice." So again, Franklin and Voltaire agree with Plato that perhaps society does need God and religion to get people to behave themselves better. What might be a possible disadvantage of the government promoting belief in God? After all, this is a show, much of which is about philosophy, and it's very important we look at both sides of an issue. Well, with regard to the possible advantage or disadvantages of the government promoting religion, we know that history shows that some true believers have caused much suffering and bloodshed. So many true believers in history have said that my God is better than your God. And indeed, some true believers have said, my God exists, but your God doesn't exist. And what has been the result? Anti-Semitism has been the result. The Crusades, in which Christians killed Muslims and Muslims killed Christians. And also the religious wars in Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, in which Catholics killed Protestants and Protestants killed Catholics. Indeed, some would argue that religion is still causing problems in the Middle East today and also in Northern Ireland. Well, what might be the best ways to get people to behave well, besides possibly using religion to do that? Well, some people urge strict laws. Some people urge economic security. Bertrand Russell believed that if people had more economic security in society, they would treat other people better. And of course, education can be an important way to cultivate good behavior in human beings. What if all classes in America began with the teacher? Well, I should say this. What if each term in every school in America began with the teacher introducing the semester with this statement? There's only one rule. There's only one rule in my class, and that is, we shall all try to be kind and fair to each other. Again, what if all schools in America, including universities, teachers and professors, began each term with that statement? We shall all try to be kind and fair to each other. Of course, another way of promoting good behavior in society is through good example. Confucius believed that if politicians and businessmen and teachers and parents provided a good example of decent behavior to young people, that would be the best way of promoting virtue. Finally, Plato believed that the most just person was the happiest person. He also believed the most wicked person was the unhappiest person. And in the Republic, Plato says this: justice itself we have found best for the soul. Justice itself we have found best for the soul. What do you think? As always, I'd like to close with a thought from Henry David Thoreau. In Walden, Thoreau reminds us that we're all artists. He said this: to affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts.